Hi, welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Today I want to talk about disclosures and the difficulty in making them, and unfortunately, quite often the difficulty in receiving the responses. The reality is, for most people, when they're disclosing a history of abuse or assault, particularly childhood abuse, and most especially to a family member, the response isn't really what we hope for. And there are a lot of different reasons for this, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. But one of the most important things I want you to really hear, to take in, is that when somebody responds in a way that is ultimately unhealthy or inappropriate, it's not about you. It's not personal. So, deciding to tell somebody your story is quite challenging. There are a lot of fears that can be present. Generally, you've spent most of your life really protecting that secret. The idea that you're protecting the people around you from knowing that secret. So choosing to share your story, your experience, isn't easy. You have to push through the fear, the doubt, the fear of judgment. There's a lot that goes into it. And the fear of judgment, the fear of not being believed, are some of the biggest. And unfortunately, the truth is that for a lot of people, when they disclose, again, particularly to a family member or somebody who's kind of involved in your life in a more intimate way, those disclosures are not met in the most appropriate way. And so then it reinforces any of the fear and judgment, shame that might already be there. So it's important to think about why you're disclosing. When I am working with somebody and they are considering disclosing to somebody, we usually spend some time, or at least I encourage that we spend some time kind of talking about what their expectations are, what their hopes are, and what the possibilities are for those things being met and for them not being met. And then kind of prepare for what's going to come up, the feelings that are going to come up, the impact that it could have on relationships if those hopes and expectations are not met. So, when you think about disclosing, it's important to think about what is your intention. And maybe you just want to share your story. Maybe you just don't want to keep it a secret anymore, and that's okay. Maybe you have an expectation that somebody is going to do something, that maybe they'll confront somebody. That's okay too. It's important to recognize, though, what is your expectation so that when you go into it, you know that. And you can then also know that if that expectation or hope is not meant, to not take it personally. And that is the most important thing. Because the truth is that there are a lot of people who really just don't know how to respond when somebody discloses abuse. Again, especially if it's somebody that you both know, somebody that you maybe have a relationship with, a close relationship with. So most people don't really know how to respond. And sometimes your disclosure can be met with kind of silence. And sometimes it can be met with much more direct ways that feel really hurtful. So first thing to know is if that disclosure is met in a way that is not healthy or not appropriate, not what you hoped for, don't take it personally. It's also, I think, important to recognize that if somebody meets you in that way, the reason that it's not personal is because it's about them. If somebody responds to a disclosure in a way that is deer in the headlights, not know what to say, or actually says something that is completely inappropriate and maybe doesn't believe you or something like that, tells you that you're lying or you're just trying to create trouble, that's about them. That's about their inability to cope with what you're telling them. It's their inability to know what to do in that moment. It may be their need to self-protect against their own feelings that are present. But none of that is about you. None of it is about you. It doesn't mean that you're wrong in disclosing. It is important to think about who you are disclosing to. So why are you disclosing? And then thinking about, okay, who is it that I'm disclosing to? Because if that person that you're disclosing to is somebody that you've not really been able to, for whatever reason, maybe your relationship just is kind of new, but if it's somebody that you've not really been able to have a lot of connection with in terms of being vulnerable, having that vulnerability met with maybe equal vulnerability or support. So being mindful of, okay, I'm going to share with this person, how has this person shown me that they can be there, that they can hear me, that they can support me, that they're likely to respond in a way that is going to be supportive versus dismissive. Because I think we all have those people in our lives, again, especially family members, who when we try to talk to them about something that's difficult, or maybe there's something difficult that's gone on in the family, but they don't ever want to talk about it. There's a good chance that that person, that's how they deal with things, right? So if you disclose to them and you have a history that that's how they tend to respond to difficulty, there's a good chance that they're likely not going to respond in the way that you hope. So think about that. Doesn't mean that you can't disclose to them. It just means that on the front end, it might be important to really work through, with a professional ideally, to really work through how that's going to unfold. Work through practicing not taking it personally, working through what you're going to do if that disclosure is met in a way that feels hurtful. So boundaries is a part of that. So again, it doesn't mean that you can't ever disclose to that person if they're not capable of hearing it. It just means that you need to be prepared for what could be possible when you do respond, or when they respond to your disclosure. Some of the ways that people can respond in a way that is not helpful, maybe even quite hurtful, is, these are things that I know happen. Either I've experienced it myself or I've heard from a lot of people that have experienced it, but kind of the deer in the headlights, right? Like, okay, you tell them this, you pour your heart out to them, and they don't really say much of anything at all. And then they try to move the conversation in a different direction. Clearly, they're uncomfortable, right? And they're not uncomfortable because of what you're telling them specifically, or that it happened to you. They're uncomfortable because they don't know what to do with that. And again, that has nothing to do with you. It has to do with their capacity for being with that discomfort. It's not about you. But that feels really, really dismissive, which feels really hurtful. Again, especially if it's somebody that you've had a significant relationship with in your life. But not taking it personally, recognizing that it's not about you, can help mitigate the impact that it has on you. I think it's important in a situation like that afterwards to make sure that you have a supportive person that you can talk to about it, that you can talk through what's coming up for you, the things that it reinforces for you, that you don't have a right to talk about it, that nobody cares, all the things that are going to come up for you, because there will be things that come up for you. It's important to have a place to be able to talk about that. Another thing that can happen is minimizing. So you disclose something that's happened, and it could be a recent experience too. It doesn't have to be from childhood, but you can disclose an experience and it's minimized. So much in the same way that we minimize our own experiences, somebody else may do that too. Well, in fact, my own mom did this. When I disclosed to her, after she asked me specifically, my mom said, well, he didn't rape you, did he? Well, my understanding was I hadn't done any healing yet. So when she said that, my specific idea of rape was not the reality. And of course, her reaction to that, he didn't rape you, did he? Well, the truth is, even if it fit my definition at that particular time, I probably would have still said no. But I said no, and we moved on. It was incredibly painful at the time, even though I didn't let myself feel that pain. So people can minimize, well, it wasn't that bad, or well, it wasn't your dad, or maybe it was your dad, but it was when you were really young, or it was when you were older, or whatever. It only happened one time. People will find a way to minimize it, much in the same way that we do. And of course, then it reinforces that it's really not that big of a deal. Not good. But again, has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with what you've actually disclosed either. So no matter what it is you shared, somebody else minimizing it isn't at all related to what you've actually shared. So that's important to keep in mind too. Another thing that can happen often in disclosures, and this happens certainly with people that you're very close to, and it can also happen a lot with friends. You disclose part of your story, and people will meet it with positivity, which is really a form of denial and avoidance. So, oh, you're so, you've done so well with your life. Good for you. Or, oh, everything happens for a reason and we need to find the reason so that we can move on. That will be, this is what your soul needed to fulfill its potential. You've created this so that you can heal generations before you. Like there are all kinds of things that are cloaked in positivity, that are actually quite dismissive, avoidant, minimizing. And I think sometimes they can mean well, but that's actually a way of coping. It is. And we, particularly over these last handful of years or so, it seems much to do with like online stuff, that there is this vast messaging out there that is all about finding the positive, finding the gratitude, finding the meaning, like all of this, that everything is somehow valuable to you. Well, I can tell you that I have never met a survivor when they start really doing the healing work who has found that beneficial. Now, if they're still in a form of denial, it feels really beneficial because, yes, that affirms how I want to think about it, because I don't want to get into the deep stuff. I want to just see it as a positive thing so that I can find out what that is and move forward. So if somebody is there, they're going to grab a hold of that as, yes, this is how I move forward. But there's still a part of them that is feeling dishonored because they're not truly being witnessed in that. Just like they've dishonored themselves by denying, minimizing, and avoiding, rationalizing. So all those coping mechanisms. So again, that has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your story or your experience. It has to do with how they cope. How, and not necessarily with abuse even specifically, but just how they cope with difficulty in life. Choosing to see the positive part of it. And a lot of people are recognizing now the reality of like toxic positivity. And truthfully, I've always felt that way. Like when I first started becoming aware of like the spiritual community is where it really became this significant thing. And I was finding myself going down a rabbit hole sometimes of this toxic positivity. And I was like, what is going on here? What is happening? And I found myself questioning my own way of thinking about mental health. But anyway, I digress a little bit there. But all of these ways are ways that other people cope and never have anything to do with you or your story. So we cannot take that personally. In my own disclosures, I have been met with all of these things in some way or another. I have also, particularly one time, maybe mostly one time, I was met in a very supportive way by my sister-in-law. And it was such an anomaly that I didn't quite know what to do with it. It was a bit challenging to experience it. And again, I actually didn't disclose to her. She asked me a question, and that's how that came up. But being met in a way that was really so healthy, so appropriate, was a little uncomfortable, honestly, because we're not used to that, because we don't meet our own truth in really supportive, loving ways. We meet our own truth with denial, with minimizing. So we almost have an expectation of that. And while it doesn't feel good, it fits with our own way of coping. And unfortunately, we take it as proof that we don't matter, that our story doesn't matter. But none of that is true. So people can actually say, like, that didn't really happen, or it couldn't have happened the way that you remember. What? That's a way to it's a way for them to be able to deny and avoid having to say or do anything. Because if they are able to believe that it didn't really happen in that way, that you just kind of were too sensitive or you misunderstood, then they don't have to face that reality. And again, this happens mostly if they have a relationship with the person that you're saying did it. They can say, well, it happened a long time ago. It's time to move on. Or it happened a long time ago and look what you've been able to do with your life. Focus on that. Don't think about that other stuff. That's just going to bring you down. One of my ones that the word itself really bothers me because it is such a significant way that people diminish their own experience. Don't dwell on it. I have come to really despise that word. Don't dwell on it. Oh, don't get sucked into all that negative stuff. You need to focus on the positive. The truth is that we cannot heal until we are able to meet our truth and that pain that goes along with it. Because there is no way that you can experience sexual abuse or assault or any childhood abuse without it being painful. And until we do the deep work of healing, that pain is still there. No matter how we mask it, no matter how we push it to the side, avoid, deny, or minimize it, no matter how we try to make it look somehow different, it's still there, which is why you struggle in the ways that you do, whatever that might be. Self-doubt, relationships, boundaries. There's a reason that you struggle with those things. So, when it comes to disclosure, if somebody responds in a way that is not helpful or actually inappropriate, it's never about you. It doesn't mean you were wrong in disclosing, but it may mean that who you chose to disclose to was not the best person to disclose to right now. And maybe you still think about disclosing to them or sharing other things with them, but you do it for you because it needs to be said for you, not because you need their support. And again, working with a professional is going to be an important part of that process because sometimes we do want to say something to somebody. We want to put it out there, but then have no expectation, no desire that they're going to be able to support you in that. And there can be benefit in that. And we can get the support that we need from someplace else, even if we want it from them. There's some work to do around healing with that. There's grief work that maybe needs to be done with that. But we can still disclose to people that are important to us without needing their support around it. So when you do decide to disclose, be thinking about who has shown me by the ways that they deal with difficult things, difficult conversations, who has shown me that they're likely going to be somebody who can listen, who can hear this right now. And maybe it will take you a while to find that person. Maybe it will never be somebody in your family. That is the reality for a lot of people. Maybe it won't be the person who you've believed is your closest friend because they've got their own stuff that makes them incapable of being able to hold your story. It may not be your partner. Sometimes our partners, because of their own stuff, don't know what to do with that. They want to protect you. They are hurting because you're hurting, and they don't know how to deal with that. And so sometimes they don't respond in the healthiest way. But it doesn't mean that your story doesn't deserve to be told. There are people who have the capacity to hear, to truly listen, and to support you. But it may take a little while to really know and feel relatively sure. Not that you're going to trust it 100%, because learning to trust 100% takes a long time with healing. But there's a good chance that there is somebody in your life that likely can be that person. So, thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your comments, your thoughts, your reactions, your experiences. Did you learn anything? Were you able to say, oh my God, I thought I was the only one? Share in the comments below. I would love to connect with you. If you think that this video might be helpful to somebody else, also please consider sharing. If you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe and click the little notification to make sure that you are the first to know when my videos go live. So thank you again, and I will look forward to connecting with you soon.